Miss Liz here. So today we're making pumpkin bread or pumpkin muffins, however you want to bake it. I am going to be making pumpkin muffins because I find that to just be easier to serve. It's easy to grab one and take, but it does bake up really nicely in a loaf pan if you want to do an actual loaf of pumpkin bread. So either one loaf pan or a couple of muffin pans. Depending on how full you fill them, I usually get about 18 out of this recipe. It just depends on how large they are. So, all right, so to start with, we're gonna start by mixing our wet ingredients first today, and we're gonna add our dry ingredients to it. As always, when you're making a bread, you can kind of decide if you want to use 2 bowls and then gradually add them together. I find in this recipe, it's pretty easy to just do a 1 bowl, less dishes to clean up afterwards. So that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna start with 1 can of pumpkin. It's a 15-ounce can is a basic can of pumpkin usually. And we're just gonna put that right into our bowl. Grab a spoon, just make this easier. Okay, I'm just gonna scrape this out. So 1 can of pumpkin puree. You want to make sure that you have a can of just pumpkin. Sometimes the cans will be pumpkin pie filling where it's already seasoned. Sometimes has a little bit of something else already in it. So just make sure you're getting pure pumpkin, not pumpkin pie filling that's already been seasoned and all of that for you. All right, so we're just gonna scrape that out into the bowl, just like that. And then we're gonna add our sugar. So we're doing white sugar and brown sugar, and we're doing, let's see, 1/2 cup of each. So with our white sugar, 1/2 cup, nice and level on the top. And then we're gonna do 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Now, because brown sugar has moisture in it, we want to make sure that we're packing this down to make sure we're getting the correct measurement. So I usually put my scoop into the bag, and then I use this outside of the bag to kind of compress the sugar into it. Make sure I've got a nice level scoop. 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Okay, so then I'm just gonna mix the pumpkin with the sugar, just like that. If you get any clumps of sugar in there, try to break that up. Nice and smooth. Then we're gonna add our eggs. We're gonna do 2 eggs. Now, if you are an egg-free household, you can omit the eggs. You don't have to use an egg replacer. Pumpkin by itself does a pretty good job of binding, which is a lot of times what the egg is used for in this kind of recipe. It does help a little bit with the fluffiness, but you won't miss the egg too much if you're an egg-free household by just leaving it out. You'll get a more, your loaf will be, or muffins will be a little bit more dense, more like a pumpkin pie filling than a really, really fluffy, springy muffin. So the egg does add a little bit as far as texture goes, but you won't miss it if you're an egg-free household. So 2 eggs, mixed really well in there. Nice and smooth, okay? All right, so that's the main of the wet ingredients, and then we're gonna add our dry ingredients. Now, my preference when I'm adding dry ingredients straight into 1 bowl is I will add all of my dry ingredients at once, and then I will mix them together. That way I'm kind of able to mix those dry ingredients among themselves before I incorporate them fully. So we're gonna do some flour. We're gonna do 1.5 cups of flour. I'm using a small scoop here. So that's 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 1. Make sure that as you're measuring, you're keeping that flour nice and light and fluffy. We're not compressing, forcefully scooping, because then we're gonna over measure and have too much by weight. So 1.5 cups of flour into the bowl. And then we're gonna do our baking soda, which is going to be 1/2 teaspoon. Make sure you've got a nice level scoop. Scrape along the top to make sure it's nice and level. Half a teaspoon of baking soda, okay? And then 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Nice and level, just like that, okay? Then we're gonna do half a teaspoon of salt, just regular table salt, whatever you use in your home. Half a teaspoon. Okay. And then we're gonna add our spices. So for this recipe, we're using cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, and clove. If you don't have all of these individually, if you have a pumpkin pie spice blend, that works well. Or if you're missing one of these spices, you can definitely just leave it out. You don't have to use all of them. If you do, it gives a really nice layered flavor profile. But if you don't have all of the spices, that's totally fine. It's not completely detrimental to not have every single spice. That's okay. So cinnamon is the one we have the most of, which is going to be 1.5 teaspoons. 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. Okay. 1.5. Okay. And then we're going to do half a teaspoon of ginger. And then 1/4 a teaspoon of both nutmeg and clove. Okay, it's just a touch of each of those. Oh, I love clove, so good. So 1/4 a teaspoon of clove. And 1/4 a teaspoon of nutmeg. Easy peasy. So then that's all of those dry ingredients. And now that I have them all kind of piled, I'm gonna take my stirring tool here, my fork, and I'm just gonna kind of blend those lightly on the top, and then I'm gonna start mixing fully. Just like that. And make sure when you're stirring that you're scraping those sides and you're getting all the way down to the bottom. We don't want any hidden pockets of unblended mixture. Really stirring until it's nice and smooth. Oh, it smells good. I love pumpkin. Pumpkin muffins are one of my favorites. Now, if you want like a nice crumble top, sometimes especially pumpkin muffins in the fall with a nice kind of streusel topping, it's pretty simple to make. You could take about 1/2 a cup of flour, 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar, and about 4 tablespoons of a nice soft butter, and blend that together until you get kind of a wet sand consistency. And you would sprinkle those on top of either muffins or a loaf of pumpkin bread, and absolutely delicious, so good. All right, so I've got it nice and smooth. You can see here, kind of has the consistency of like a cake batter or a brownie batter. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna take our pan here, and you can either use, if you're doing muffins, you can use paper liners or you can spray with cooking spray. Just make sure that you have it nice and sprayed. If you're using a loaf pan, make sure you spray it well or grease it down with oil or butter so that your bread doesn't stick. And then my personal preference, when I am making muffins, I like to use an ice cream scoop because this is the perfect amount of batter for a muffin or a cupcake. And so I get a nice scrape here, nice and level, and just one little drop into each well, just like that. I like to use the liners. Number one, it just makes the cleanup of the pan a lot easier, makes it easier to get them out, and it's not adding that extra oil to the bottom, which sometimes makes our muffins get a little bit more crisp on the bottom. So I prefer to use the liners. Just like that. Okay. So like I said, depending on how full you're filling these, I usually get on average about 18. Sometimes I'll get maybe 20. Just depends. So I think I can probably get one more here. Let's see, I'm gonna grab a few more liners. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, I think we're gonna get 20 out of this. And then those are gonna go into the oven to bake. If you're doing a loaf of pumpkin bread, that's gonna bake for like 50 to 60 minutes in the oven at 350. If you're doing muffins, usually about 18 minutes is a good amount of time. With either one, what you want is to be able to tap the center and have it spring back. If you tap it and it leaves a dent, then it's not quite done and it needs a few more minutes. But if you tap it and it springs back nicely, then it's beautiful. If you're nervous about touching it, worried about burning your fingers, you can poke it with a toothpick or a knife and make sure that that comes out clean. Okay, so that's it. Good luck. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. I'm happy to help, and enjoy your muffins.